Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us with this talk. The topic of the talk will be Eyes on the Bog, the project called Eyes on the Bog. And I have called the presentation, Where is the Bog? Let's start with saying, where can we find bogs in the UK? Where is their distribution in the UK? Yes, you can see in the map on the screen, you will see that the bogs, the blanket bogs, are mainly at the north of the UK. Scotland is one of the main areas with blanket bogs, and the north of the UK. The UK is very fortunate to hold 2.25 million hectares of blanket bog. This is in the whole world. And between the UK and Ireland, it holds 20% of the world's blanket bog. So we should be very proud and happy to be one of the main holders of this very important habitat. So I'm talking about blanket bogs, and usually when I tell people, oh, I'm working in blanket bogs, they sometimes look a bit puzzled, and then when I say peatlands, then their face enlightens and say, oh yes, peat. So what is peat? Peat is soil that is made of partially decomposed remains of dead plants. They have accumulated on top of each other on waterlogged places for thousands of years. Now, the conditions have to be specific to form peat. And those conditions are usually waterlogged, and the water comes from the rain, and they are anaerobic. So the peat, the soil underneath lacks oxygen, and also the conditions are quite acidic. Therefore, we find blanket bogs in upland areas mainly. They get a lot of rainfall, then the conditions become anaerobic and acidic, and they start to form peat. This photograph that I use here is from one of our Eyes on the Bog sites up in the Cheviots. We put 4 stations there of Eyes on the Bog last week, and this is a photograph showing the landscape. So Bogs are really, really interesting habitats. It has really been a very happy and adventurous journey working with Eyes on the Bog project. As I said, they are found in upland areas where the conditions are wetter, and they are usually in remote areas of difficult access. I wanted to put the photograph to my right-hand side. Probably it will be on your left-hand side of the screen, but you will see I was in the Chiviots, the site I was telling you previously, and they took me to the top of the hill that you see there on the far side using a six-wheeler car. We were over a very difficult terrain, and so we went up to the top there to put one of our Eyes on the Bog stations. Next to that photograph, I just use that photograph to portray underneath the top vegetation, you start to see the peat forming there. And you see the two blue rods that I will explain later, but that's one of the Eyes on the Bog stations. So when I am trying to find sites to put Eyes on the Bog stations, I try to find what I call indicator species, that tells me that, yes, that is a bog. And one of the key indicator species for blanket bogs are Sphagnum Mosses. And Sphagnum Mosses, there are different species of Sphagnum Mosses. I just put here some of the common ones, but they can form big carpets of moss, and they are actually one of the main peat-forming species. So they help to form peat. The Sphagnum Mosses are quite easy to recognize because, as you can see in the photographs here, they have a head, and underneath, if you pull the moss of the bog, you will see that looks like a stem. And they hold, they are very wet, they hold a lot of water. So, and they are beautiful, they come in different colors. Another key species that you will find in blanket bogs are cotton grasses. We have here two of the main cotton grasses that we find here in the UK. One is the common cotton grass with several heads and wider leaves. And the other common species of cotton grass is called hare's tail cotton grass. And that has just one head and thinner leaves, almost needle-like leaves. Another component in terms of plant diversity of blanket bogs are shrubs, and we can find at least two, sometimes three types of heather. I'm talking here up in the north. First one that is one of the easiest to recognize is the crossleaf heath. That one is really a key indicator of wet conditions, and it's called crossleaf heath. In the photograph, you cannot really see it very well, but the leaves are in a cross shape. They are hairy, And as I said before, it likes to grow in wet conditions. On the other type of common heather, and that's actually one of the most common ones that you are going to find, is the heather or ling, as people call it here as well, Calluna vulgaris. And that is a shrub that grows in drier conditions. But many times you are going to find both the heather and the crossleaf heath growing together if you are on a blanket bog. Heathers, they have adapted to live in bog habitats in these really tough conditions. So they have developed a shallow root system. They also kind of are evergreen. That means they hold some green leaves all year around, and that actually helps in the photosynthesis. And underneath in that root system, they have developed a symbiotic relationship with fungi, forming a mycorrhizal habitat there underneath, helping each other to capture nutrients. We also have other plants associated with bogs. These are, when I find these plants, it really, for me, means it's a special bog, or it's a diverse bog, to put it in that way. And one of those is the cranberry. You can see the little fruit, red fruit. This is the cranberry that we drink, as a drink, but the fruits are really, really small. It's a sprawling plant. It sprawls on top of the mosses there on bogs. And the other plant that sometimes we find in bogs is the bog rosemary, and is the one on my run high side. And you usually will find only the leaves. Up to now, I haven't found a plant with fruit, but you certainly can see the leaves, and they are obviously look a bit like rosemary, the one that we use in the gardens, in our gardens. Other very interesting plants that you sometimes can find on blanket bogs are the carnivorous ones. These ones, they trap insects using different strategies. One that I have actually found quite often on blanket bogs is the sundew, the Drosera. And that one, when it feels that an insect lands, it kind of holds the leaves to trap the insect. And then the common butterwort, the leaves have a sticky material, and the insects get trapped into the leaves of the common butterwort. You can also find in blanket bogs that have been blanket bogs for a long time, you can find lichens. Usually they will belong to the Cladonia species. This photograph that I am showing you here is a photograph that I took yesterday in one of Cumbria wildlife sites. And this particular site, I was told, that has been a protected site for over 100 years. And the peat depth there, I was quite surprised yesterday because it went down to 10 meters. So the peat depth there, and I think I could have actually put more rods to measure the peat, but it was getting harder and harder, but at least was 10 meters deep, the peat there. So you can imagine how much peat and material has been accumulated through thousands of years in this place. This one is a lowland mire. Associated with bogs, you also find other wildlife. And you can find birds like curlews, you can find others. If you are very, very lucky, you might see an osprey. One of the sites I was visiting yesterday in Cumbria, they have ospreys nesting on the dead trunks of the conifer trees there. So watch for other wildlife as you are visiting bogs. So that gives you an overall view of what is a bog, a blanket bog, and the plants and wildlife associated to bogs. But why is so important to protect blanket bogs? And I put a list there, and you can come out with other ideas as well. It is a natural habitat. Is high diversity in terms of flora and fauna for temperate areas. It's not a man-made habitat, it's a natural one. I have read some literature comparing bogs in temperate areas to tropical rainforests in tropical areas, in terms of being a natural habitat and in terms of their biodiversity and endemism. The UK holds, well, this one I said before, up to 20%, but that was including Ireland. So the UK holds 10 to 15% of the world's blanket bog, which is a lot. And peat can store lots and lots of CO2. And with climate change being such an important topic at the moment, topic of discussion, I think CO2 sequestration will become increasingly important in our daily life in terms of conservation. Drinking water comes from upland habitats, so they capture and then the river, the burns come down into the lowland areas. Blanket bogs and wetlands can reduce the risk of flooding, so it's quite important. We increasingly see in the news all these events of well, not events, I mean disasters of flooding. Preserving blanket bogs and wetlands, they act as a sponge and disperse the water, so it can prevent flooding. And finally, the peat, due to being a habitat that is waterlogged, anaerobic, and acidic, it can preserve human remains and artifacts done by humans very well. Some of you might have heard of the bog mummies, and well, they preserve artifacts and human remains very well. So Unfortunately, our peatlands are being damaged and degraded due to centuries of exploitation. Some of the main activities that have damaged our peatlands, our bogs, are drainage, peat being cut for fuel or horticultural uses, burning to promote grasses for livestock or managing for game birds. Some of them have been damaged by atmospheric pollution. Some bogs have been planted with conifers or being used as being reclaimed for agricultural use. So what can we do to help our blanket bogs? So EUCN has developed a long-term, low-tech monitoring scheme on blanket bogs. And this is called Eyes on the Bog. And what this project wants to achieve is to monitor water table, peat depth, the quality of the peat itself, and other changes in the blanket bog in a long-term basis, but using low-tech devices. So some of the techniques I have been using in this Eyes on the Bog project include rose rods, which I will explain in the next slide, peat depth rods, a test called Van Post. I also use fixed point photography and vegetation quadrats. But you can do other surveys like butterfly surveys, invertebrate surveys, bat surveys, so you can add on, but these are the ones that I have been doing up to now in the different sites. So the technology is, as I said, very low tech. The first slide on the left-hand side, it shows the two blue rods that you put on a station, monitoring station. The first rod with the bit sticking up, that's to measure the peat depth, and it varies. In these last few months, I have found sites where the peat depth is less than a meter. But yesterday in Cumbria, the two sites I went to put monitoring stations, I have found peat from 6-7 meters up to 10 meters. And the second rod, which is the one flush to the ground, that is called a rose rod, and that measures the change in water table. So when these stations, by the way, have to be monitored at least once a year. So with the rose rod, you pull after a year that you have installed the station, you pull up the rod and you see where the rust mark is, and you can estimate where the water table is. The slide in the middle is just shows you how easy it is to put these rods on the ground. It was fairly easy up to yesterday when we found this pit of 10 meters deep, because, you know, the more rods you put, it it's easy enough because the soil, the peat is waterlogged, so it should be easy to pull, but the more rods you put, it gets harder. So we were really pleasantly surprised with the officer helping me to find peat this deep. And the slide on the right-hand side, it shows you how we do the bump post test. Basically, you take a soil sample, peat sample, and you squeeze out all the water from the peat, and then there is a scale that goes from 1 to 10, depending on how crumbly, sandy, or fibrous the peat is. So, this, as I explained through the presentation, Ice on the Bog is an ongoing project. Is going on in the whole UK and probably even further, and is a long-term monitoring project. So we are looking for volunteers, which we call citizen scientists, to help us to put Ice on the Bog stations, and most importantly, to keep monitoring them through many, many years. So if you are interested to know more about the project, you can contact me. Those are my details on the screen at the moment. And we are doing this project with, well, I'm working with Durham Wildlife Trust. I have a counterpart in Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. So the idea is that we would like to recruit as many citizen scientists to help us to monitor our stations. So far, I have 7, 8 sites, and on each site, I have between 2 to 3 monitoring stations. I have sites in Northumberland, Cumbria, the North Pennines. So I'll leave you with those thoughts of encouraging you to become a citizen scientist, and thank you very much, and see you soon.